Samantha had always considered herself an ordinary woman with an unremarkable life. She worked a 9-to-5 job at a local advertising firm, lived alone in a modest apartment, and had a small circle of friends. Everything changed the day she received the first cryptic message. It was a rainy Monday morning, and Samantha was already running late for work. As she hurriedly sipped her coffee and checked her emails, she noticed one that stood out from the rest. It had no subject line and no sender information. Intrigued, she clicked it open. The message was brief and unsettling. "I see you." She dismissed it as a prank or spam message, shaking off the slight unease it left behind. But over the next few days, more messages followed. They came in various forms: texts, emails, even handwritten notes slipped under her door. Each message was more personal and invasive than the last, detailing her daily routines and hinting at a deep, hidden knowledge of her life. The first text arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while she was at work. Her phone buzzed and she absent-mindedly picked it up, expecting a message from a colleague or friend. Instead, it read, "Nice blue dress. It suits you." A chill ran down her spine as she looked down at the blue dress she was wearing. How could someone know what she was wearing? Trying to rationalize the situation, Samantha convinced herself that it was just a coincidence. But the messages kept coming, each one more precise and unnerving. "Enjoying your latte at Cafe Memento?" came another, just as she was taking a sip of her favorite coffee. "You should really lock your windows," was the next, arriving as she was settling into bed. Determined to protect herself, Samantha took immediate action. She installed security cameras around her apartment, changed her phone number, and even contacted the police. Despite their best efforts, the stalker remained elusive, always one step ahead. The police found no fingerprints on the notes, and the security footage revealed nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if the stalker was a ghost, slipping through the cracks of her reality. Samantha's sense of safety evaporated, replaced by a constant, gnawing fear. The once comforting walls of her apartment now felt like a cage, trapping her in a nightmare she couldn't escape. She became hyper-vigilant, jumping at every shadow and startling at every unexpected sound. Sleep became a distant memory as she lay awake, eyes wide open, scanning the darkness for any signs of an intruder. Her friends noticed the change in her demeanor. She became withdrawn and paranoid, canceling plans and avoiding social gatherings. They tried to comfort her, suggesting she take a break or see a therapist, but Samantha was too consumed by her fear to heed their advice. The stalker was always watching, always waiting. She felt like a puppet on strings, dancing to the tune of an unseen master. The messages continued to haunt her, each one a reminder of her vulnerability. "You can't hide from me," one read. Another simply said, "Soon." The messages felt like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation, one that Samantha was not sure she would survive. Days turned into weeks, and Samantha's life spiraled further into chaos. Her work suffered, her relationships strained, and her mental state deteriorated. The constant fear gnawed at her sanity, leaving her a shadow of her former self. Every corner held a potential threat, every stranger a possible stalker. The world had become a maze of paranoia, with no clear way out. As she sat in her darkened apartment one evening, staring at the latest note, a realization struck her. She could no longer live like this, in perpetual fear. Something had to change. She needed to take control of her life and find a way to end this nightmare. Little did she know, the true nightmare was just beginning, and the answers she sought were far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. Determined to reclaim her life, Samantha took drastic measures. She packed her belongings, left her job, and moved to a new city. She chose a place where no one knew her, hoping to leave the stalker behind and start afresh. The new city was bustling and vibrant, a stark contrast to the quiet life she had led before. She found an apartment in a busy neighborhood, believing that the constant activity would provide her with a sense of security. For a while, the change seemed to work. Samantha settled into her new routine, found a new job, and began to make new friends. The city's noise and chaos were comforting, drowning out the echoes of her paranoia. She even started seeing a therapist, Dr. Mitchell, who helped her process the trauma and rebuild her confidence. With time, the messages seemed like a distant nightmare, and she started to feel like herself again. However, just as she began to let her guard down, the nightmare resurfaced. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Samantha returned home to find a note slipped under her door. Her heart sank as she read the familiar, chilling words. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Panic surged through her veins as she realized that the stalker had found her again. She frantically checked her phone and email, finding new messages that detailed her recent activities. "Nice try," one read, "but you can't run from yourself." Fear gripped her as she realized the stalker had been watching her all along, even in this new city. Desperate and scared, Samantha turned to Dr. Mitchell for help. She poured out her fears and frustrations, detailing the relentless pursuit and the invasive messages. Dr. Mitchell listened intently, his expression serious. He suggested increasing their sessions and diving deeper into her past, believing that understanding her trauma could provide clues to her stalker's identity. As their sessions progressed, Samantha began to open up about her childhood and past experiences. She spoke of a traumatic event she had buried deep within her memory, one that seemed to hold the key to her current torment. Dr. Mitchell guided her through the process, helping her uncover repressed memories and confront her fears. One day, during an intense therapy session, a breakthrough occurred. Samantha recounted an incident from her teenage years, a violent altercation with a close family member that had left her emotionally scarred. The memory was hazy, but the emotions were vivid, flooding back with a vengeance. She realized that this event had been the catalyst for her current state, a hidden wound that had festered over the years. Dr. Mitchell's face grew concerned as he listened. He suggested that the stalker might be someone from her past, someone who had been deeply affected by the same event. Samantha's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of her memory. The realization hit her like a freight train. The stalker wasn't someone from her past. It was a part of her. Dr. Mitchell gently explained the possibility of dissociative identity disorder, a condition where a person develops multiple identities to cope with severe trauma. The stalker, he suggested, might be an alter ego she had created, a manifestation of her repressed anger and fear. The messages, the notes, and the sense of being watched were all products of her fractured mind. Samantha was horrified at the revelation. The idea that she had been stalking herself, that her mind had created a separate identity to torment her, was too much to bear. She felt her world crumble around her as she grappled with the truth. Dr. Mitchell reassured her that with continued therapy and support, she could integrate her identities and heal the rift within her mind. Determined to reclaim her life, Samantha committed to the therapy process. She confronted her alter ego in her sessions, acknowledging the pain and anger it held. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with setbacks and emotional turmoil. But slowly, she began to feel a sense of control returning. The messages ceased, and the constant fear dissipated. Samantha's journey to recovery was far from over, but she had taken the first steps towards healing. She realized that the true battle was within herself, and by facing her inner demons, she could finally find peace. As Samantha delved deeper into her therapy sessions, she began to piece together the fragments of her shattered psyche. Dr. Mitchell guided her through the labyrinth of her mind, helping her confront the memories and emotions she had long suppressed. Each session was a step toward understanding and integrating the parts of herself that had been fractured by trauma. The sessions were intense and often emotionally draining. Samantha would leave Dr. Mitchell's office feeling both exhausted and hopeful, as if she were unearthing long-buried treasures and dark secrets simultaneously. She started to keep a journal, writing down her thoughts, dreams, and any memories that surfaced. This practice helped her track her progress and provided a sense of control over her own mind. One night, after a particularly grueling session, Samantha experienced a vivid dream. In the dream, she was a child again, standing in a dimly lit room. The room was familiar, filled with old furniture and the scent of her grandmother's perfume. She saw herself in a mirror, but the reflection was not of her current self. It was the younger version of her alter ego. The reflection spoke to her, its voice a mixture of anger and sadness. It blamed her for not protecting them, for allowing the trauma to happen. Samantha woke up in a cold sweat, the dream lingering like a shadow over her consciousness. She shared the dream with Dr. Mitchell, who saw it as a significant breakthrough. He explained that the dream was a manifestation of her subconscious mind trying to communicate with her. The child in the dream represented the part of her that had been most affected by the trauma, the part that had split off to form the alter ego. By acknowledging this part of herself and its pain, Samantha was taking a crucial step toward healing. Samantha began to experience moments of clarity, brief glimpses of integration where she felt whole and at peace. These moments were fleeting, but they gave her hope. She continued to confront her alter ego in her therapy sessions, acknowledging its existence and the reasons it had come into being. She apologized to it, forgave herself, and slowly, the walls between her identities began to crumble. One afternoon, Samantha decided to visit the old house where she had grown up. The house was abandoned now, a dilapidated shell of its former self. She walked through the empty rooms, memories flooding back with each step. In the attic, she found a box of old photographs and letters. As she sifted through the contents, she came across a letter addressed to her, written by her younger self. The letter was a cry for help, a desperate plea for protection and understanding. Reading the letter, Samantha felt a surge of emotions. She realized that her younger self had felt abandoned and betrayed, and this had led to the creation of the alter ego. She sat in the attic, tears streaming down her face, and wrote a letter in response. She assured her younger self that she was now safe, that they would heal together, and that the trauma would no longer define them. Returning to her apartment, Samantha felt a sense of closure. She shared the experience with Dr. Mitchell, who praised her courage and progress. He suggested that they continue working on integrating her identities, but he was optimistic about her recovery. Samantha felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that she could finally put the past behind her and live a life free from fear. Samantha's journey toward healing was nearing its climax. She had made significant strides in her therapy, and the messages from her alter ego had ceased. However, the true test of her progress was yet to come. Dr. Mitchell suggested one final exercise to solidify her integration, a confrontation with her alter ego, face to face, in the safety of his office. They decided on a method known as chair work, where Samantha would sit in one chair and speak to an empty chair, as if her alter ego were sitting there. This technique would allow her to externalize her feelings and have a dialogue with the part of herself that had been causing so much fear and pain. The day of the session arrived, and Samantha was both nervous and determined. She sat in the chair, facing the empty one, and took a deep breath. Dr. Mitchell guided her through the process, encouraging her to speak freely and honestly. As she began to speak, she felt the presence of her alter ego, as if it were sitting across from her. She expressed her anger, fear, and sadness, acknowledging the pain they had both endured. She apologized for not protecting them, for allowing the trauma to happen. The exercise was emotionally charged, and Samantha felt a torrent of emotions pour out of her. As she spoke, she felt a shift within herself, a sense of understanding and acceptance. When it was time for her alter ego to respond, Samantha switched chairs and spoke from its perspective. She expressed the feelings of betrayal and abandonment that had led to its creation. The conversation was intense, but it was also cathartic. By the end of the session, Samantha felt a profound sense of relief and closure. Dr. Mitchell congratulated her on her courage and progress. He explained that the confrontation was a crucial step toward integrating her identities and reclaiming her life. Samantha felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She knew that the journey was not over, but she was confident that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. However, as days turned into weeks, Samantha's sense of relief began to wane. Strange things started happening around her apartment. Items would move on their own, and she would hear whispers that seemed to come from the walls. She began to feel as if she were being watched, a cold presence that never left her alone. The line between reality and illusion blurred, and she found herself slipping back into the paranoia that had once consumed her. One night, she woke to find herself standing in front of the mirror, her reflection distorted and twisted. It was as if her alter ego had returned, more malevolent and powerful than before. The figure in the mirror sneered at her, its eyes filled with hatred. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that her alter ego had not been integrated, but had instead grown stronger, feeding off her fear and uncertainty. Desperate for help, Samantha contacted Dr. Mitchell, who agreed to see her immediately. She arrived at his office, her hands trembling and her mind racing. She explained what had been happening, and Dr. Mitchell suggested another session of chair work, hoping to confront the alter ego once more. As they began the session, Samantha felt a surge of fear. She switched chairs, assuming the role of her alter ego, but this time something was different. The alter ego seemed to take control, its voice echoing in her mind. It spoke of anger, betrayal, and a desire for revenge. It blamed Samantha for its existence, for the pain they had both endured. Suddenly, Samantha felt an overwhelming force within her, a darkness that threatened to consume her completely. She tried to fight it, but it was too strong. Her alter ego laughed, a chilling sound that filled the room. Dr. Mitchell watched in horror as Samantha's face contorted, her eyes filled with a malevolent light. In a final act of desperation, Samantha lunged at Dr. Mitchell, her hands closing around his throat. He struggled to break free, but the grip was too strong. The alter ego's voice filled her mind, urging her to destroy the one person who could help her. As Dr. Mitchell gasped for breath, Samantha felt a moment of clarity, a fleeting sense of control. She released him, collapsing to the floor in tears. Dr. Mitchell, coughing and gasping, managed to call for help. Paramedics arrived and sedated Samantha, taking her to a psychiatric facility. She was placed under constant observation, her mind trapped in a battle between her true self and the alter ego that refused to let go. In the sterile confines of the hospital, Samantha's condition deteriorated. The alter ego took over completely, and she became a shell of her former self, lost in the darkness of her own mind. Dr. Mitchell visited her often, hoping for a breakthrough, but the Samantha he had known was gone, replaced by a twisted version of herself. The tragic end came quietly, with Samantha slipping into a catatonic state from which she never awoke. Dr. Mitchell, filled with guilt and sorrow, mourned the loss of a promising young woman whose life had been shattered by trauma and mental illness. He vowed to continue his work, helping others who struggled with similar demons. But the memory of Samantha would haunt him forever, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human mind.